I rubbed my tired eyes, squinting at the parking lot before me. The lights on the entrance flickered, casting red hues on the dark parking lot. It was late after midnight, and the parking lot was almost deserted, with almost all the parking spaces filled with cars. Exhausted after a long drive, the only thing I wanted now was to rest. So I drove through the parking lot, finding a space to park the car. Finally, I pulled into a space, the only available spot in the row. I had been out of town for work for a few days and just came back. Attending meetings in the morning and then driving back from one city to another had me extremely tired. Usually, when I drive into the parking lot of my apartment building, I can see the guard sitting in his cabin, but today wasn't the case. Too tired to think about why, I got out of the car. As I was taking my luggage out of the back seat, I saw some shadows a few meters away from where I was, thinking that could be any other resident. I ignored it. I locked the car, and the sound of car locking echoed throughout the parking lot. Just when I turned around to go to the elevator, I heard someone crying in pain. I stooped in my path, thinking whether to go check or not. I stood there thinking. When I heard the sound again, thinking that maybe someone needed help, I decided to check. Guessing where the sound came from, I went in that direction. It was the same corner where I had previously seen the shadow. Upon reaching there, I saw a person lying on the ground, holding their left leg and crying in pain. Getting closer, I asked what happened and if he needed any help. He told me that he hurt his left leg falling to the ground and something must have hit his leg as he was in lots of pain. Thinking he needed help, I bent over him to help him stand. Suddenly, he grabbed me from the shoulder and pulled me down, taking out a dagger from God knows where and placing it on my neck. He said to me that if I wanted to stay unharmed, I should follow his instructions. My heart pounded in my chest as I stared into the eyes of the assailant. At that moment, I realized that I had encountered a criminal and my life hung through a thread now. My mind raced, desperately seeking an escape plan as I tried to keep calm in the face of this danger. I immediately assessed my options, knowing that my best chance of survival was to stay calm and comply with the criminal's demands. I slowly nodded, trying to keep my voice steady as I assured the assailant that I would do whatever he asked. My mind was racing, trying to remember any self-defense tips or strategies I had read or heard about in the past, but it all seemed like a blur in that moment of crisis. The assailant took control, directing me to hand over my belongings and warning me not to make any sudden moves. As I reached for my wallet and phone, I couldn't help but think about the news articles I had read on street robberies and carjackings. It was like a sudden flashback to all the information I had come across about such criminal activities. Despite the fear and tension, my mind couldn't help but process the situation through this lens. The assailant's swift and calculated actions reminded me of the descriptions I had read about in the article. As I handed over my belongings, my mind raced through ways to remember more details about the assailant's appearance, as it could potentially aid the authorities in finding him, but unfortunately, he was wearing a black mask, making it hard to make out his facial features. The encounter was over in a flash as the assailant swiftly made his escape, leaving me shaken but physically unharmed. Despite the trauma of the experience, I found my thoughts drifting back to the assistant's appearance as I tried to remember the details. It struck me how crucial it was to remember and communicate every detail, no matter how small, to assist in identifying and capturing the assailant. As I stood in the now empty parking lot, I made a mental note to narrate the entire incident to the authorities in the most accurate and detailed manner possible. The clock struck midnight as I closed my textbook, tired, at the dimly lit university library. With my backpack slung over one shoulder, I made my way through the deserted corridors of the library. My mind was still buzzing with the night's study session. The campus, once bustling with life, now lay still and ominous under the pale moonlight. As I stepped out into the chilled night air, the empty parking lot stretched before me. Late-night study sessions were the usual thing for me, and I was used to the silence of night, though it always made me terrified to go home alone this late at night. And today the flickering light of the lamps and coldness of the night had made everything tenfold scarier. Unbeknownst to me, danger lurked in the shadows. My car stood at the far end of the parking lot. The lampposts struggled to illuminate the vast expanse and weren't enough to cover the whole parking lot. I started walking fast. However, a glimmer of movement caught my eye. In the shadows near my car, a figure was bent over another car, fidgeting with something. Panic surged through me as I realized someone was attempting to break into cars. My breath hitched, and a cold sweat broke across my forehead. My first instinct was to retreat, but the criminal might have already seen me coming out of the library. I had to think quickly and find a way to ensure my safety. I scanned the surroundings, desperately searching for an escape route. The dark, isolated parking lot offered limited options for my safety. I weighed my options, alerting campus security was the best step, but I couldn't move abruptly as it could alert the thief. I reached for my phone, my fingers trembling as I dialed the campus security hotline, but then stopped, thinking that the person could hear my voice and my safety was at risk. Then I decided to go back into the library and make the call. As I moved cautiously towards the library's entrance, I turned my head back at the shadowy figure, but a chilling realization gripped me as the criminal was now standing. Fear made me move forward hurriedly, and I plunged back into the library. I fumbled for my phone, the light of the screen casting an eerie glow on my face. Dialing campus security, I tried to convey the urgency of the situation and asked them to come as soon as possible. The voice on the other end reassured me, promising immediate action. However, as I hung up and glared at the surroundings, the sinister feeling lingered. The library, once a sanctuary, now seemed like a trap. That mysterious person could come inside at any moment. I had to make it back to my car, as it was the only means of escape. As I made my way back into the parking lot, my heart pounding in my chest, I tried to devise a plan to reach my car without encountering the criminal. My car felt like a distant mirage. The library doors creaked shut behind me, echoing through the silent night. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for the courageous task ahead. I decided to take a different route, avoiding the direct path to my car to minimize the risk of running into the criminal. Suddenly, I heard the faint sound of footsteps behind me. My pulse quickened. I was scared enough to not look back and started walking fast. The footsteps mirrored mine, growing louder. My mind raced and panic clouded my thoughts. Panic set in as I started running and my breath ragged. I prayed that I would reach my car before the criminal caught up to me. Suddenly, a bright light flickered on in the parking lot, illuminating the area and revealing the shadow of the criminal pursuing me. I reached my car and fumbled for my keys, hands trembling. With a desperate twist, I unlocked the car and hurried inside, slamming the door shut. The figure approached, now seen because of the car's headlights. A sinister grin crossed their face. I wasted no time and started the engine. The car roared to life, and I sped away, leaving the criminal behind in the desolate parking lot. Gasping for breath, I glanced in the rearview mirror. The library, the parking lot, and the ominous figure all faded into the distance. The encounter had left its mark, a lingering horror ingrained into my memory. The night had transformed from a quiet study session to a heart-pounding chase with darkness. I had a long and tiring day at the office today, stretching into the late hours of the night. Working late night shifts was nothing new, and the hum of the fluorescent lights in the empty office became a familiar soundtrack to my solitude. Tonight, however, an unsettling feeling lingered in the air as I gathered my belongings to leave. As I made my way out of the office, the darkness seemed thicker than usual. Working late at night for the past week had taken a toll on my health, and exhaustion had been creeping into every fiber of my being. As I stepped outside into the deserted streets, I felt a cold winter breeze sending shivers down my spine. The clock struck midnight and the parking lot was empty. I quickened my pace, hoping to escape the unsettling quiet that enveloped the isolated office complex. As I reached the car, the feeling of unease intensified. Glancing around, I couldn't shake the sensation that someone or something was watching. I heard footsteps coming from behind. I was confused as a few minutes before the parking lot was empty, I looked over my shoulder. There, from the shadows, a silhouette emerged of a person, a face not visible by the darkness. Panic set in as that person quickened his pace to match mine. Frustrated and anxious, I fumbled for the keys. The stalker appeared before me, revealing a hooded figure with hollow eyes, glaring at me. Seeing him made me freeze in the place, leaving me in fear for my life. The stalker moved towards me, a cold silence, before the stalker spoke, demanding money in a low voice that sent shivers through my core. My eyes darted towards his hands, and I could see the gleam of the blade in his hand, terrified, I guess, that it wasn't just the money he was demanding. My mind raced as I tried to realize the true intentions of the stalker. He must have known that this car was mine, and he would soon try to snatch the keys from me. I knew I had to escape this somehow. I remembered the self-defense techniques I had learned in a brief workshop and decided to take a calculated risk. Complying with the stalker's demand, I slowly reached for my wallet. As the stalker leaned in, I swiftly turned, delivering a powerful knee to his gut. The stalker groaned in pain, momentarily distracted from me. Seizing the opportunity, I ran towards the office entrance with a pounding heart and adrenaline coursing through my veins. Soon recovering from the attack, the stalker started to chase after me, his footsteps growing louder and clearer. I could feel my lungs burning as I ran. Just as the parking lot seemed to stretch endlessly, I reached the office's glass doors. Desperation fueled my strength as I pulled the heavy doors shut. After getting inside the office and trapped the stalker outside, gasping for breath, I locked eyes with the hooded figure through the glass. He was wearing a dark black collar hood with a black mask on his face. He on the other side started pounding on the doors loudly. I dialed the police, reporting the incident as the pounding was still heard in the background. I waited for what seemed like years before the sirens echoed in the distance, drawing closer with each passing moment. When the police arrived, the parking lot was empty. The pounding stopped a few minutes before their arrival, and the stalker vanished into the night. Though physically unharmed, I couldn't shake the silent stalker's haunting presence from my memory. Kept thinking about what could have happened if I hadn't acted in that moment of fear and took self-defense measures. As the police took my statement, I couldn't help but feel grateful that I had learned those self-defense techniques. From that night forward, the isolated office parking lot became a place of lingering shadows and whispered fears, a reminder that sometimes the most chilling threats are the ones we can't see coming.